something quiet has been happening beneath the surface of modern courtship, and most men miss it entirely because it contradicts everything they've been taught about attraction. You see it in the way a woman's interest intensifies the moment a man pulls back, not from manipulation, but from genuine disinterest. You see it in the way her texts multiply when he stops. You see it in the way she begins to chase the very man who, weeks earlier, she kept at a comfortable distance. And you see it most clearly in the confusion on his face when he realizes that the more he wanted her, the less she wanted him, and the less he cared, the more she pursued. This isn't cruelty, it isn't game playing, though it looks like it from the outside. It's something older, something mechanical, something that operates beneath the level of conscious choice. It's a law of human desire, articulated with surgical precision by a French novelist in the early 19th century. A man who spent his life studying the mathematics of passion and the strange alchemy by which longing transforms into obsession. His name was Stendhal, and what he discovered about rejection and attraction remains one of the most uncomfortable truths a man can learn. You can see the pattern everywhere once you know to look for it. A man meets a woman, there's initial interest, maybe even chemistry. He begins to invest texts, time, attention, small gestures that communicate his growing desire, and then something shifts. Her responses are slow. Her availability decreases. The warmth that was there begins to cool. Most men at this point do precisely what their instincts tell them to do. They increase their investment. They text more. They offer more. They explain, pursue, and attempt to reignite what they felt was there. They operate from a logic that seems self-evident. If she's pulling away, I need to show her more of why I'm valuable. If she's losing interest, I need to give her reasons to stay interested. And this is precisely where they lose her, because what Stendhal understood, what he mapped in his work with the precision of a military strategist, is that human desire doesn't operate on the logic of commerce. It doesn't increase when you add value. It doesn't grow when you demonstrate your worth. Desire, genuine desire, emerges from a completely different mechanism, one that has almost nothing to do with your actual qualities and everything to do with the presence or absence of obstacles, uncertainty, and distance. Stendhal called this process crystallization, and it remains one of the most powerful and least understood dynamics in human attraction. Here is the thesis that will structure everything that follows. A man who makes himself too available, too confident, too easily obtained doesn't become more attractive through his consistency, he becomes invisible through his predictability. And the moment he withdraws, not as a strategy, but as a genuine redirection of attention, he activates the very mechanism that his pursuit had killed. Stendhal lived through the aftermath of the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars, a period when old aristocratic codes of honor and courtship were collapsing, and new social dynamics were emerging. He watched men and women navigate love in an age of uncertainty, where traditional structures no longer dictated who married whom or how desire was supposed to proceed. He was fascinated by the irrationality of romantic attraction, by the way a woman could ignore a devoted suitor for years and then suddenly develop an all-consuming passion for a man who barely noticed her. He saw this pattern repeat so consistently that he began to treat it not as an anomaly, but as a law. In his book, On Love, Stendhal describes crystallization as the psychological process by which the mind transforms an ordinary person into an idealized object of desire. He borrowed the metaphor from the salt mines of Salzburg, where miners would throw a bare tree branch into the depths of the mine and retrieve it months later, covered in brilliant crystals. The branch hadn't changed in essence. It was still a dead piece of wood, but it had become unrecognizable, transformed into something that appeared precious, beautiful, almost magical. This, Stendhal argued, is what the mind does when it encounters an object of desire that remains just out of reach. It begins to coat that person in projections, fantasies, and imagined perfections. Every small gesture becomes evidence of their uniqueness. Every absence becomes proof of their value. The mind, in the presence of uncertainty and obstacles, doesn't retreat, it intensifies, it builds. But here's the mechanism most men miss. Crystallization cannot occur in the presence of certainty. If the branch is sitting in your hand, fully illuminated, fully available, the mind has no reason to decorate it. There's no mystery to solve, no gap to fill with imagination. You see it for what it is, a branch. But place that same branch in the depths, obscured, difficult to reach, and suddenly the mind goes to work. Suddenly, it becomes coated in possibility. This is why rejection, distance, and unavailability so often fuel attraction. Not because women are perverse or broken, but because the human imagination requires space to operate. It requires uncertainty. It involves the possibility of loss. And when a man removes that uncertainty by making himself completely available, entirely predictable, completely assured in his interest, he kills the very process that generates desire. I work with men who come to me confused, sometimes angry, because they did everything right and still lost interest. They were consistent, they were available, they communicated, they showed up, they didn't play games, and she drifted away. What they don't realize is that their very consistency, their very availability, removed the tension that desire requires to survive. They became the branch sitting in daylight, familiar, safe, certain. And certainty, in the early stages of attraction, is the quietest killer of desire there is. Let me show you how this actually unfolds in a man's life, step by step, so that you can see the mechanism in motion. He meets a woman. There's initial attraction, maybe even reciprocal interest. They go on a date, maybe two. Things feel promising. He begins to think about her more often. He starts to imagine a future, and because he's been taught that honesty and consistency are virtues, he begins to communicate his interest clearly. He texts regularly. He initiates plans. He makes himself available. He wants her to feel secure, to know that he's serious, that she doesn't have to guess where he stands. And for a brief window, this works. She responds. She engages. She seems interested, but then almost imperceptibly, something begins to change. Her response time lengthens. She's busier than she was before. Plans become harder to lock down. The warmth that was there, the playfulness, the curiosity begins to cool into something more polite, more distant. He notices, and because he's invested now, because he's already started to build a narrative in his mind about who she is and what this could become, he does what most men do. He increases his efforts. He texts more frequently, hoping to recapture the momentum. He offers more dinner at a nicer place, tickets to something she mentioned, his time, his attention, his emotional availability. He begins to subtly adjust himself, sanding down the edges of his personality that might create friction, emphasizing the qualities he thinks she values. He becomes accommodating. He becomes flexible. He becomes, in his mind, a better option. And with each adjustment, with each additional investment, her interest continues to decline. What he doesn't understand, what he can't see, because he's operating from a framework of logic and fairness, is that he's suffocating the very thing he's trying to nurture. Every text that goes unanswered and then is followed up with another text signals that his attention is cheap, that his time is abundant, that he has no other priority higher than her. Every plan he rearranges to accommodate her schedule signals that his life bends around her orbit. Every emotional revelation he offers without her having to pursue it signals that there is no mystery left to uncover, no depth left to discover. He's handing her the fully illuminated branch and wondering why she doesn't find it beautiful. Stendhal would say this man has interrupted the crystallization process. He has removed uncertainty. He has made the outcome too predictable. And in doing so, he has removed the very ingredient that allows desire to build. Because desire, at its core, is not a response to value. It's a response to the fear of losing value. It's not about what you offer, it's about the possibility that what you offer might slip away. This is why the man she later pursues often looks so unremarkable from the outside. He's not necessarily more attractive, more successful, or more charming. But he has one quality the first man lacked. He is uncertain. His interest is unclear. His availability is limited. His attention feels scarce. And in that scarcity, her mind goes to work. She begins to wonder. She begins to project. She begins to fill the gaps with imagination, decoration, and crystallization. The branch descends into the mind. Most men experience this once and write it off as bad luck, poor timing, or her being confused. But when it happens twice, 3 times, 5 times, a pattern begins to emerge, and the man starts to notice something he doesn't want to see, that the relationships where he cared less lasted longer. Woman, he was ambivalent about being pursued harder. The moments when he pulled back, even slightly, even accidentally, were often the moments her interest spiked. And this creates a profound internal dissonance because it contradicts everything he's been taught about how love is supposed to work. He's been told that relationships are built on communication, vulnerability, consistency, and presence. And all of that is true, but only after a foundation of desire has been established. Before that foundation exists, those same qualities can kill attraction in its infancy. They remove the obstacle, they eliminate the uncertainty, they answer the question before it's even fully formed. And a question that's already responded to is a question the mind stops asking. I once spoke to a man who had been dating a woman for about 6 weeks. Everything was progressing naturally. They had chemistry, shared interests, and good conversation. He was genuinely excited about her and expressed it openly. He told her he liked her. He made time for her consistently. He texted every morning. And then, over about 10 days, she went cold. Not hostile, just distant. He asked her what changed, and she said something that devastated him in its vagueness. "I just don't feel it anymore." He couldn't understand it. Nothing had gone wrong. There had been no fight, no betrayal, no incompatibility revealed. If anything, things had been going well. But that was precisely the problem. Things had been going too well, too smooth, too predictable, too certain. She knew exactly how he felt. She knew exactly where he'd be. She knew exactly what he'd say. And in that certainty, the crystallization process died. The branch sat in daylight, and she saw it for what it was, just a branch. 6 months later, she reached out to him. She'd been thinking about him, she said. She missed him. She wondered if they could reconnect. And here's the critical detail. In those 6 months, he hadn't been waiting. He'd moved on. He'd focused on his work, his friends, and his own life. He'd started seeing someone else casually. When she reached out, he was polite but indifferent. He didn't rush to respond. He didn't rearrange his schedule. He didn't invest emotional energy in rekindling something that had already ended. And her interest, which had been completely dead, suddenly reignited, not because he was playing a game, but because the conditions for crystallization had returned. He was uncertain again. He was unavailable again. He was a branch in the depths of the mine again. He didn't pursue the reconnection, and she pursued harder. She initiated plans. She texted first. She made herself available. And he watched, almost clinically, as the exact dynamic that had killed her interest when he was the pursuer now operated in reverse. Stendhal would have recognized this immediately. The mechanism doesn't care about fairness or reciprocity. It cares about obstacles and distance. It cares about the presence of uncertainty. Remove that, and desire collapses. Restore it, and desire to rebuild. Now, zoom out from the individual man and look at the larger system in which this dynamic operates. We live in an era where male pursuit has been culturally reframed as a potential threat. Approaching women in public is increasingly treated as intrusive. Expressing romantic interest at work carries professional risk. Persistence, once romanticized, is now often labeled as harassment. And while these shifts have been necessary corrections to real abuses of power, they've also created a secondary effect. They've made male desire itself feel dangerous, something to be concealed, apologized for, or expressed only with excessive caution. At the same time, dating apps and social media have fundamentally altered the economy of attention. A woman of even average attractiveness on a dating platform is flooded with options. Hundreds of men signaling interest, availability, pursuit. In this environment, scarcity doesn't exist. Certainty is everywhere. Every swipe is another man making himself immediately available, another text thread, another branch in daylight. And so the very infrastructure of modern dating has made crystallization almost impossible. There's no obstacle, there's no distance, there's no gap for the imagination to fill. The result is a strange paradox. Men are told to be more emotionally available, more communicative, more vulnerable, and these are good qualities in a functional relationship. But in the context of early attraction, especially in an environment already saturated with male availability, these same qualities often accelerate a woman's loss of interest. The man who follows the advice, who is open, consistent, present, and clear about his intentions, finds himself losing ground to men who are chaotic, inconsistent, emotionally unavailable, or simply indifferent. And this doesn't happen because women are broken or because they consciously prefer mistreatment. It occurs because uncertainty and obstacles activate a psychological mechanism that certainty and availability do not. Stendhal understood that desire is not a reward for virtue. It's a response to conditions, and the condition it responds to most powerfully is the fear of loss. This is why a woman can be indifferent to a man for months, only to develop intense feelings the moment she suddenly senses he's losing interest. This is why a breakup often reignites passion that had long gone dormant. This is why distance, silence, and withdrawal usually produce more attraction than pursuit, explanation, and presence. If a system makes your natural expression of interest a liability and rewards ambiguity and emotional distance, then the man who operates with integrity and transparency is not rewarded, he is penalized. And many men, after experiencing this enough times, begin to make a quiet calculation. They stop pursuing. They stop initiating. They stop investing emotional energy in courtship, not because they've become cynical or hateful, but because they've recognized that the cost of participation now exceeds the reward. They withdraw not in protest, but in protection. Stendhal would likely see this as a civilizational symptom. When the natural dynamic between men and women becomes so distorted that sincerity is punished and indifference is rewarded, you create an environment where authentic connection becomes almost impossible. Men learn to hide their interest. Women learn to interpret consistency as weakness, and both sexes end up trapped in a game neither wants to play, but both feel forced to navigate. The cost of this isn't just romantic failure, it's deeper. A man who learns that expressing desire makes him less desirable begins to disconnect from his own wanting. He starts to monitor himself, to edit his impulses, to perform indifference even when he feels interest. He becomes a stranger to his own emotions, and over time this split between what he feels and what he's learned, he must display erodes his sense of self. He becomes reactive rather than self-directed. He starts to shape his behavior around her responses rather than his own values. He loses the plot of his own life, and here's the trap. The more he loses himself in this process, the less attractive he becomes, because what women respond to, beneath all the social scripts and conscious preferences, is a man's relationship to his own purpose, a man who is grounded in something larger than her approval, who has a mission that predates her presence and will continue after her departure, naturally embodies the very qualities that activate attraction. He is not excessively available because he has other priorities. He is not excessively certain because his attention is distributed across multiple domains. He is not collapsing his identity into the relationship because his identity exists independently of it. This is not a strategy, it's a state of being, and you cannot fake it, because women are exquisitely attuned to the difference between a man who is genuinely self-contained and a man who is performing self-containment to manipulate her interest. The former is grounded in reality, the latter is grounded in her, which makes him just another version of the over-available pursuer, only with a different costume. So what does this look like in practice? How does a man navigate this dynamic without becoming manipulative or losing his integrity? First, notice when you begin to make her the center of your attention before she has earned that place. Most men do this unconsciously. They meet a woman they're attracted to, and within days she's occupying the majority of their mental and emotional bandwidth. They're thinking about her between meetings. They're crafting texts. They're analyzing her responses. They're imagining futures. And none of this is reciprocal, yet it's all happening in his mind. This is the beginning of the loss. The moment your attention becomes more invested in her than in your own path, you started the process of self-abandonment. Instead, treat early attraction as a probationary period. She's interesting, but so are a dozen other things in your life. You're willing to explore the connection, but you're not willing to reorganize your existence around it until she's demonstrated through consistent action over time that she's worthy of that level of investment. This isn't coldness, it's discernment. It's the refusal to give away your attention as if it's worthless. Second, stop trying to convert her doubt into certainty when she's unsure, when she's distant, when her interest seems to waver. Your instinct will be to pursue, to explain, to demonstrate value, to remove her uncertainty. Resist that instinct. Let her sit in the uncertainty. Let her wonder. Let her experience the possibility that you might lose interest, that you might walk away, that this opportunity might close. This isn't cruelty, it's respect for the mechanism. You're allowing crystallization to occur naturally, rather than interrupting it with reassurance. Third, when she pulls back, you pull back further, not as punishment, not as a game, but as a natural consequence. If her investment decreases, your investment decreases proportionally. You mirror her energy without explanation, without negotiation, without trying to talk her back into interest. You redirect your attention elsewhere, and you do this not to manipulate her return, but because a relationship in which you're doing all the pursuing isn't one worth having. Fourth, protect your mission at all costs. The moment you start canceling plans, skipping workouts, deprioritizing your work, abandoning your friends, or rearranging your life to accommodate her schedule before she's done the same for you, you've entered dangerous territory. A woman doesn't respect a man who treats her as more important than his own purpose. She might enjoy the attention temporarily, but it repels her at a deeper level. She's testing whether you're centered in yourself or in her, and every time you choose her over your own priorities, you're failing that test. Fifth, embrace the reality that you will lose some women by refusing to over-pursue. Some will interpret your self-containment as disinterest and walk away. Let them. Those women were never going to respect you in the long term anyway, because they were looking for a man whose attention they could control, not a man whose attention they had to earn. The woman worth having is the one who recognizes your groundedness as strength, who is intrigued rather than repelled by the fact that you have a life she's not yet the center of. This is the integration of Stendhal's insight. You don't try to create artificial scarcity or perform indifference. You simply have to abandon yourself in pursuit of her approval. You maintain your center. You protect your attention. You allow her to experience uncertainty not because you're playing a game, but because uncertainty is the natural state when two people are genuinely evaluating compatibility rather than rushing toward a conclusion. Now imagine two futures. In the first, you ignore all of this. You continue to operate from the logic of commerce, demonstrate value, increase investment, pursue, explain, and accommodate. You continue to make yourself excessively available to women who haven't earned that availability. You continue to collapse your identity into relationships before those relationships have proven themselves. And 5 years from now, you're more confused than you are today. You're more bitter. You've been through more failed relationships that followed the same pattern. You've lost more of yourself in pursuit of approval that never came. You've become a man who doesn't trust his own instincts, who second-guesses his own desire, who feels like a stranger in his own life. In the second future, you treat this as an initiation. You recognize that desire operates according to laws that don't care about your good intentions. You stop trying to be the exception. You build a life that doesn't require her validation to feel meaningful. You become the kind of man whose attention is scarce, not because he's performing scarcity, but because he has a mission that demands his focus. You let women come and go based on their genuine interest rather than trying to negotiate their desire through explanation and pursuit. And 5 years from now, you're quieter. You have fewer people around you, but the ones who remain are there because they chose you, not because you convinced them. You have more respect for yourself. You move through the world with less need for external validation. You've become self-authored. The path of sovereignty is more challenging. It's lonelier at first. It requires you to sit with the discomfort of not knowing whether she'll return, of not having certainty, of losing women you were attracted to simply because you refused to abandon yourself. But it's the only path that preserves your dignity. It's the only path where you remain the protagonist of your own life rather than a supporting character in hers. Here is the thesis again, in its simplest form. The more you make yourself available before she's earned that availability, the less valuable that availability becomes. And the moment you withdraw, not as manipulation, but as self-respect, you restore the very conditions that allow attraction to build. And here's the mirror. She does not kill your desire for purpose. She reveals its absence. If your attention is easy to capture, easy to monopolize, easy to redirect away from your own path, the problem isn't her strategy. The problem is that you didn't have a strong enough path to begin with. A man on a mission isn't immune to attraction, but he's immune to losing himself in it. And that immunity is what makes him magnetic. If this resonated, if it named something you felt but couldn't articulate, share it with men who need to hear it. Subscribe to keep this work alive. And understand that this isn't about winning her back or gaining leverage. It's about reclaiming the part of yourself you gave away without realizing it. Desire is not a reward for your virtue. It's a response to your self-possession.